Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Wednesday, May 23rd, 2025, and today we're going to talk about a unique nightshade disease. Does vermicompost lead to damping off? And weeding gear. So let's do it. All right, well, lovely Wednesday to you all. We had yet another round of severe weather come through last night, and that's a new one, not like the last time I said yet another. And I saw some serious damage down there in western Tennessee and Alabama. Hoping you all are safe. It was mostly just like rain for us, which brings our rain total for the year, according to the Precip app, up to just over 31 inches already, or the equivalent of 787 millimeters. That's like 10 inches more than it usually is by this point. That's 10 inches less than the last 2 years' total rainfall. So yeah, which to be fair, the last 2 years were dry, but my goodness. I mean, it could completely dry up and we get almost no rain for the rest of the year, but that is a lot of rain so far. The weather has just no chill right now. It's actually supposed to get relatively cold this weekend, so maybe I should have tried a different phrase there, but the weather's not really calming down. Anyway, so because we are getting so many awesome new Patreon members, I'm also getting quite behind on all the awesome new questions we are getting, which honestly is the best problem to have in the summer when my brain capacity to be creative and come up with new topics on my own is admittedly a little bit low. So the Patreon page is truly one of the ways to guide our topics and help your host out a bit. So much love to that. Anyway, today and tomorrow, we will take on 3 questions each day and try to catch up a little bit. Our first Patreon question of the day comes to us from Bill Price, who asks, quote, I've been looking into soil blocking for next season, and many sources mention wool pellets for making up blocking mix, like sheep wool. They seem kind of unusual for a soil mix. What do they bring to the mix? I also see some suggest vermicompost as a component. I've tried that with seed starting mixes before, but I found I had more damping off with it. Recommendations or thoughts on either? Thank you as always, Bill. End quote. Okay, great questions here, Bill. Love it. The wool pellets thing is somewhat new to me. I've talked about wool in general as a potential amendment or mulch in the past, and there's definitely some potential there, but as an addition to soil mix, I'm less sure of that. I found a study that reported some positive preliminary results using wool pellets in soil for lettuce growth, but definitely not a large or comprehensive enough study to say, sure, throw those in your soil mix. The aim of this study was more also to show the potential for wool as a nitrogen fertilizer alternative directly in the soil, and it showed some positive results, but again, not in a soil mix. Wool also retains moisture extremely well, so my concern with a soil mix would be the disease or poor growth from a lack of air. So if you do come across a mix with those pellets in it, just start small and do a very small test run before banking on it. I would maybe more consider wool as a garden amendment. Now, as for the vermicompost and damping off, this is something I've heard people say before, but I'm not sure it's the vermicompost. First, I should qualify what I'm about to say with all vermicompost is not created equally, and there's a difference between well-made, fresh vermicompost and something you buy in a box store that's been sitting in a plastic bag in a hot storage facility for 6 months. But by and large, according to the research, vermicompost does not generally lead to damping off, and moreover, it can be used as a treatment for some of the diseases that cause damping off, like Pythium. Now, like I said, vermicomposts are not created equal, and at least one study found that vermicast made with African nightcrawler was more effective than that made with tiger worms, although both did suppress the disease. Moreover, we know that plants grown in media with vermicompost perform better in general, with several studies to back that up. So my guess is that it's probably not the vermicompost, unless the vermicompost was just in really rough shape when you got it, or maybe not fully decomposed, or who knows. I put vermicompost in soil mix several times when we were making our own mix, which I don't recommend making your own mix. It's an enormous amount of work, but that's for another time. And anyway, those were always my best homemade mixes. No competition. The only reason you don't see it more in commercial mixes, and I'm somewhat assuming here, is that it's just expensive. Vermicompost is nowhere near as cheap as just like regular compost. Damping off, as we've discussed relatively recently, is usually just poor air movement and overwatering of the leaves and or poor soil mix with not enough of the aeration element or adequate nutrition for the plants, or they just stay way too wet. Honestly, I would be much more concerned about using the wool pellets in the soil mix than vermicompost. Exponentially so. So, Bill, if that mix is not working for you, I would maybe try some of the other things I mentioned there. However, I do think it would be cool to run a trial between the wool pellets, maybe like wool broken up, versus, say, like peat moss to see if it will hold in the right amount of moisture or comparative amount of moisture, because wool would be a better product than peat, which is not as quickly regenerated. So, Bill, if that mix is not working for you, I would maybe try some of those other things that I mentioned there first to, kind of get rid of the damping off. The vermicompost, however, should be good to go as long as it's good vermicompost. Great and fun question, though, Bill. I love it. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, let's talk about an interesting plant disorder. It's also the name of my ska band, BRB. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Ring of Fire. What if you could turn your brush problem into black gold? The Ring of Fire biochar kiln is your spring tool for soil transformation, converting woody debris into high-quality biochar in just hours. Biochar will kickstart your compost, retain water and nutrients in your soil, and provide habitat for beneficial microbes. Now $19.95 with flat rate shipping. Their spring sale runs through June. Don't wait to boost your soil and optimize your inputs. Visit ringoffire.earth/growers now to learn more. Also, for more information on biochar, check out the No Till Market Garden podcast interview with Kelpie Wilson, inventor of the Ring of Fire kiln, that we will link in the show notes. Today's episode is brought to you by Precip. Precip is billed as the easiest way to keep track of rainfall, and that is true, but it is a lot more than that. Sure, you can open the app and immediately see accurate rainfall totals, but you can also save locations to see historical rainfall totals, wind speeds, and all sorts of other nerdy details. Their radar-based technology means you can ditch the rain gauge. I usually have to do that anyway because the kids find a way to smash it with a baseball bat. You can ditch the rain gauge and start tracking rain and other growing conditions all on your phone. Click the link in the show notes to find out more. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions now. Today's second Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Jesse Hammond. Lots of good Jessies in our Patreon group. Anyway, Jesse Hammond, who writes, quote, for years I've been having tomatillos fall victim to what seems to be a disease that creates white bumps on the leaves, and then they fall off and die. Now it is impacting my prize pepper plants. It looks like edema, and that's what I thought it was for a while, but the new conditions have plenty of air circulation, so now I don't know. I can upload photos if that is helpful, end quote. Okay, so Jesse did indeed send me some additional photos, and they said with those photos, quote, I try to watch your show every night here on the West Coast. Thanks for taking a look. Local farmers on Lopez Island say it is edema. I don't feel like I have been overwatering my plants, but signs point to this. I love growing peppers and I have a decent success, but I do struggle with edema and blossom end rot. I am in my soil with calcium, so all signs point to watering and air circulation. This issue also affects the tomatillo plants in the greenhouse as well, end quote. Okay, so first, I can't confirm what the disease is. I would just take it to the NRCS, your extension agent, and see if they can find somebody to confirm for sure what it is. But it certainly looks like edema, and if you're watching this on YouTube, it's a very curious little disease that, although I've not seen it in person, almost looks like little crystals or powder on top of, in the bottom of the leaves with little bumps kind of following. It affects both transplants and plants in ground. So if you're growing in a greenhouse or high tunnel, especially in a humid area where light levels and cool weather and potentially poor ventilation occur, edema, spelled E-D-E-M-A or O-E-D-E-M-A, that felt very robotic. But anyway, but it is also more accurately, if you prefer a different term, oh dear, it's called Intumescenses. Intumescenses. Not a great band name. More like an album. Anyway, that could be very well what it is and very likely your problem. Now, you mentioned Lopez Island, which is an island off the coast of Washington State, which may be an important factor here, in fact. For instance, you thought ventilation and moisture could be the issue, and that could be the whole of it, sure. But also, looking at the research, quoting one paper I found from the Connecticut Agriculture Experiment Station, quote, edema is likely to occur in greenhouses during periods of prolonged cool, cloudy weather conditions in winter and early spring, end quote. So it is also a problem that the general temperatures and light levels around those plants are also increasing this disorder's presence. Backing up for a second, what makes edema interesting is that it is actually a physiological disorder and not an infectious disease, meaning it's not a bacterium or virus or fungus. It's not going to jump from one plant to another, but rather it's a disorder caused by environmental conditions. Quoting another paper I found on integrated pest management from UConn, quote, excess moisture in the growing media combined with high humidity levels in the greenhouse leads to low transpiration rates. This causes a buildup of excess moisture in the cells, so the cells enlarge and erupt. Blisters develop due to this increased cell pressure. Light quality may also be a factor. Recent research has shown that ultraviolet B light, which is mainly provided by the sun, helps prevent the formation of intumescences. Word is going to haunt me. In tomatoes. In a Michigan State University study, researchers reported less intumescence in tomato plants when supplemental light was in the 50 to 50 blue-red ratio compared to 100% red light, end quote. So effectively, I'm not sure the degree to which you are growing these particular plants indoors, but consider not just changing the ventilation and water, but also potentially the light and warmth you're providing these plants. It sounds, based on this particular disorder that happens notably all over the country, like it's almost strictly about treating the environment and not the plant, which to me would be a relief. Infectious diseases can be hard to manage, but a better environment will improve and reduce not only the edema, but also potentially other diseases that your tomatillos, peppers, etc., maybe that just shows you they are not getting what they need. And it may also be worth, as you grow these plants out, identifying which varieties and such are not as susceptible to the abiotic stresses that cause edema. Anyway, I hope that was interesting. Certainly was interesting for me. I love investigating this stuff. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we'll talk about specialized weeding gear, which is a term that will make sense presently. Be right back. Today's episode is also brought to you by Farmhand. I started a CSA to grow food and build community, not to drown in admin work. Spreadsheets, emails, and pack lists take up too much time. If I could spend less time at my desk and more in the field, that'd be a win. Enter Farmhand. Farmhand automates billing, newsletters, websites, and member support, saving CSA farmers 20 plus hours a week. Focus on farming, not paperwork. See how Farmhand can help. Book a one-on-one demo with founder Ari at farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. Today's episode is also brought to you by FarmRaise. Still struggling with your balance sheet? Your lender's asking for a balance sheet and you're stuck with a spreadsheet mess or guessing your numbers? FarmRaise Tracks takes the stress out of farm finance. With one click, you can generate an accurate, up-to-date balance sheet that shows your assets, liabilities, and equity. No accounting degree required. You'll be ready for loan applications, tax season, or just a clearer picture of where your farm stands. Join thousands of farmers using Tracks to build stronger businesses. Get 20% off with code NOTIL20 at farmraise.com for the lifetime of your membership. All right, back to the show. Our final Patreon question of the day comes to us from Alex Leidy, who asks, hey there, I've been tuning into Growers Daily podcast and thoroughly enjoying it. It's weeding season, so I have a question. Any opinions on weeding knives? I have been working with some migrant workers that are exceptional growers, and they love to use fixed blade knives for weeding around sensitive crops like garlic, berries, celery, etc., using the knife to pry deeply rooted established weeds and then scrape the surface of the soil to kill smaller weeds. Though I have 10 years of growing experience, this is new to me. Though it's slightly time consuming, the bed comes out really nice. In general, what is your weeding gear and do you ever incorporate knives? End quote. All right, that's a super fun question here, Alex. And obviously, my preferred weeding gear is mulch, but the truth is that I still have plenty of places on the farm that occasionally need cultivation because I try a lot of different low and no mulch sort of techniques, so I have a lot of experience to advise people who don't have access to a lot of mulch. And sometimes I fail to mow my living pathways in time to make sure life is never dull. But I also have years of experience working on a tillage farm, so I have no shortage of cultivation hours logged and thoughts on the subject. So I will do a total weeding tool rundown and then focus a bit more on your specific question. The first thing I will say is that my favorite weeding tool is a stirrup hoe, sometimes called a hula hoe. I want to do as much of my weeding standing up as humanly possible, as I'm sure you do. Think of this tool like a swinging blade, like a hoop almost, on the bottom of a long handle that can go forward and backward to cultivate while keeping your back straight. I used to use a collinear hoe for years, but on the advice of several growers of the time, but the stirrup hoe is just significantly more efficient with less work in my experience. The one trade-off is that the stirrup hoe is sharper and will kill more plants if you goof, like if you just hit a rock and then just accidentally slam into that plant, it is gone. which is probably why these workers are carefully weeding up against the plant with knives, but we'll get to that. For the pathways, again, if mulch is not the option, things like a wheel hoe are probably the most efficient, though that is a ton of work on your shoulders. I generally use a large stirrup hoe, but for larger market gardens, that's going to be inadequate. The wheel hoe, and then the next step up would be like the tractor cultivators. That's really going to be the best thing for your pathways. For digging up rooted perennials, like you were talking about with a knife, I have a nice trowel from Johnny's that I love, but I have also used our harvest knife. I have an old harvest knife that I'll talk about in a second, but usually I like to bust out that trowel if I have the time. Alex wrote a reply to this question that they said they picked up a hori, which is also a really good option. It's just kind of a sort of like a trowel, but like a knifey trowel. If it's a really big plant, like a well-established, I don't know, dock root or something, then a spade shovel is the ticket for me. I have a really nice spade from Ace of Spades, I think is what it's called. I do have a pocket knife for a farmer. That's a tool that is common as a hat, I guess, but I do not use it in the dirt so much. But I will use one of our old harvest knives around plants as well. Not always, because you said it's kind of time consuming to do that, but in terms of accuracy, especially with like sensitive plants or plants that are high value and very long lived, that's the way to go. And I'll bet there are better knives than what I use. I just kind of use that old harvest knife because it's around. Alex also wrote in that follow-up, quote, I have settled on a butcher's skinning and ribbing knife with around a 5-inch blade for smaller weeds. It has a unique shape that is great for cutting under just the soil surface. Those two knives live in the same sheath. Because soil dulls blades so quickly, I quickly touch them up daily. For the same reason, I keep a third knife strictly for harvest that never touches the dirt. We, of course, use standard implements in the field with larger crops. I should say that I am mostly using knives in our house where we interplant and space tight, end quote. And yeah, that was my thought. I wouldn't use the pocket knife for soil work because the dirt would absolutely dull it. But I can definitely see in a tight sort of spacing or in an interplant, like you said, how a small precision cultivation tool like a knife comes in really, really handy. Although absolutely, I prefer to take care of weeds with mulch, tarps, and occasional flame weeder maybe. There are also just an unending number of cultivation tools out there that have come up in the last decade, from tine rake weeders and various rolling cultivators that gently weed in and around plants that could be explored on larger scales. There are also tractor implements like finger weeders. As you get into larger and larger scales, weeds do happen. So it's good to have an array of tools in the well, this time it's kind of the literal toolbox to help out. I mean, I certainly wouldn't recommend, and I'm sure Alex agrees with this, using like that boning knife, for instance, on a large scale, but around a handful of precious plants, it's certainly effective. Anyway, that's my go-to cultivating tool setup and my thoughts on cultivation tools in general. What say you? Otherwise, I think that's it for this Wednesday. Don't forget, we are now, here at No-Till Growers, a 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out. Also, you can share it with your friends and just say, hey, I really like this nerdy podcast about mostly soccer and sometimes soil. You should check it out. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeden for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and the team at No-Till Growers. Also shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook with a Seed Farmer at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-till-growers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of May for the next like 10-ish days, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs to May. See what I did there? To drumroll, Joseph Legat. If it's French, it's Legot. If it's not, it's Legat. That's the motto. All right, so when Laurel describes the dust storm that had brought about this beautiful savanna they were now standing in there in Texas, which makes sense if you've been listening, as a gift, the ranch hands are definitely curious about what in the world that means. Well, Laurel explains. Remember a few days ago when we were talking about what this place could look like if we sort of managed it better, right? Well, I sort of have, let's call it a talent, or maybe it's a curse, or a gift, as I like to call it, where I can show you what's possible in just about any given situation. The sad thing is it only lasts for about 30 minutes, and then I kind of run energy and it comes back. And we go back to the real world. So what you see around you is what this place would look like if we, and notably everyone around us, managed our soils and farms better. So the group sat there kind of stunned with this news. Groups of birds flying, filling the trees. There was like several different ground animals running around. The ground was soft and grassy beneath their feet. The air smelled clean and floral. And then suddenly Laurel passes out cold. Now the group asked themselves, like, what happens if we can't revive Laurel? That is tomorrow on the What If gift. Yeah, nailed it. All right. Thanks for watching and or listening. Tomorrow will be Thursday, if it just goes according to plan. Bye. Intumescenses, Intumescenses, Intumescenses. Now it's like a kind of a metal band.